So I'm doing early stage investing at William Morris Entertainment, which is a large media company, talent agency, booking agency. On the music side, our business is live touring, so we're the largest booking agency there, which is where I started. And on the investment side, we are strategically investing in early stage companies all across consumer internet broadly, kind of looking at the intersection of tech and media and thinking about, where can a large media company add value to startups, mostly in the United States, but hopefully all across the world eventually, through our relationships, access, domain expertise across entertainment, music, film, fashion, and sports. We've done 43 investments over the last 4 years, so we're fairly active. Usually we're coming in alongside other VCs who are leading the deal, and we're writing a much smaller check. Some of our early portfolio companies are companies like Uber and Pinterest, Warby Parker, Songza. Most recently, we invested in companies like Splice, ClassPass, Reserve, things like that.
Great. So that's a pretty broad range of media cases. And what I thought we'd focus today's discussion is on the theme of nowhere to hide. We like to think in terms of what is really happening in a given industry and what point of time are we in the transformation of that industry. And clearly through companies like Spotify and others, streaming has sort of very much changed the distribution segment of the monetizable music industry. I think it's very much at the beginning of it, but I think there's also massive value potential in other elements. So what I thought we can talk about is the value chain and where you see it today, and I can maybe comment on that. And then we can talk about how technology is underpinning it and where the opportunities lie going forward. And then maybe we can zoom into the customer experience and the product side of things.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, as far as, nowhere to hide goes, I think one thing that we feel very strongly about as representatives of artists and of champions of artists is that we see now more than ever all of our artists needing to build a relationship very, very early on with their fans, and whether that's in a live setting or whether that's on social media. We're working very closely with their managers and the artists themselves from day one, as soon as we're signing with them, to figure out what are ways in which we can provide sort of a different experience for their fan. And I think one of the fun things about working with some of our clients is they love to experiment and they're creative just by their nature. So if they partner with someone who allows them to sort of like bear who they are, managers who are thinking entrepreneurially, it can be really exciting. So that can be again in sort of a form of a show and doing something sort of non-traditional there. It can also be online. You have Beyonce on Tumblr and Instagram. You have Lindsay Sterling on YouTube. It's going to look different for each artist. But if you think sort of creatively about where that platform is and where it's best for you to reach your fans, I think that's something that we're always kind of looking to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that through the value chain in terms of from creation to production, distribution, and anyway, and just sort of fan audience management, I think nowhere to hide to me is looking at every single part of that value chain and seeing where the value is. And there's been a lot of people working and a lot of capital flowing through the music industry. There are certain question marks as to how much that ends up in the artist's hands. I think this is an increasingly relevant topic, one that we're certainly cautious about in terms of how rights are managed, how new artists are choosing to build their careers. You have the online only. You have artists that are choosing not to be signed up, and they have flocks of record labels coming towards them, talent agents and so on and so forth. And they're making very good money. They're realizing that you can build your own brand, you can figure out your own distribution. If you manage your own audience through social media, you can get a lot of value out of that. Where does this put you guys?
You can, I think, to a point. So there's definitely still a place for labels, and the value that they provide as far as the promotion and nurturing an artist and what they can do as far as actually picking an artist to an extent is still there and very much real. You can have artists create music in their bedroom, right? Whereas they used to have to go to a studio. So as far as the creation side of it goes, there's been a huge transformation there. But you can still distribute on YouTube. You can do all of these new things. You can gain a fan base, and that's a new way in which you can get recognized, get signed, get an agent. But at the end of the day, as far as really building up your business and to become a really big, meaningful act, I think there's always going to be room for someone to shepherd that, and that's a label, right? And there's a lot of value that they still provide. I mean, it's not necessarily going to be producing CDs, but as far as radio promotions go, as far as looking at data and understanding, what's going to be a hit song and how they can really help build your career and help make decisions, I think that's still very much a key piece of the process.
Sure. And in the coming, say, 3 to 5 years, how do you see your role evolving? And just to put some context around that, we work with record labels in a number of our companies, for instance, and we see that they've gone from the sort of very traditional role that they've had for the past goodness knows how many centuries, to today being very much portfolio managers. So you're managing the presence, you're managing the brand, and at the end of the day, you're managing all the assets that an artist is, or you're trying to do that anyway. It's somewhere between management and the label. Where does that put you, and how is your role evolving?
On the agency side, or as a label?
Sorry?
On the agency side, or
on the agency, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that the power dynamic has definitely shifted. I think for most of our clients, the majority of their revenue is coming from live, and we see that only increasing. I mean, our business on the live side is growing year over year, and what's really interesting to me as someone who is investing in technology, consumers are spending more and more time on their screens, phones, computers, watching YouTube and things like that. Yet at the same time, we're also kind of craving these live experiences, and it's why you see just more festivals being created every single year and different sort of live events happening. Our artists are touring more than they have around the world, and there's sort of this macro trend of globalization. People in in parts of China that you and I have never heard of know who Britney Spears is and Lady Gaga, and they can go tour there and do massive business. So we just see that being a really good thing for our artists, and just kind of creating a much bigger business for them over time. And you also see a big shift in power from the labels to the managers. So again, we work very closely with a lot of our artists and their managers, who are essentially they're entrepreneurs. They are thinking about how do they take this massive brand, and how do they do something interesting with it to keep it relevant, to keep it innovative in a sense. And it's that, I think, is the hardest job, is sort of being a manager right now. I mean, there's a million things you're having to think about on top of your day job of managing.
Sure. So one thing you mentioned was the live, and there is a clear division between the live and the digital side of the music business, and that there is a lot of value that is being created on the digital side, and the live music has not really been touched. Yeah, our portfolio company, Jukely, the event subscription service, you know of that company? Yeah. So they've created a subscription service for events, where for I think $20 a month you can attend up to an X amount of events. And I mean, the uptake across the US and now increasingly in Europe has just been wild. And this is just the beginning, right? It's helping artists forecast much more effectively what their live income is going to look like. Where do you see the potential going forward on the live side of things? Do you see live merging with the digital, with the whole VR space, for example?
It's a good point. I'm super excited about sort of the potential for VR. I don't know if it's going to look like an immersive live music experience like you would imagine as just watching a concert. I think there's actually a lot more you can do in sort of a 360 3D environment with new types of visuals and binaural sound, which is basically just replicating how you listen to music naturally. So if you think about what does live sound or what does live music show look like in a VR experience, it's probably not what a live concert experience is like. It's probably a lot different than that, which is interesting. I don't know what the business model is. I would love to see a live show in VR. I think that'll probably happen far down the road. And as far as I'm not super bullish on the idea of paying to stream a concert or a festival. I think there's really nothing that can replicate that experience of being at the event. It's much more about just the music. It's, there's all the other elements that come together. So people are always going to pay for that, I believe. And there's, always ways in which you can make that event immersive and interesting and new and fresh. And that's sort of our bet on that side of the industry.
Sorry, time check. So where do you see the hurdles in today's music business, and what is stopping more efficiency in the market, in the music industry taking place today?
There's still a lot of there's a lot of issues around, we all are familiar with the issues around how artists are getting paid, and sort of as far as when it comes to digital, digital audio, there's still the massive shift happening over to streaming and sort of the business model there. I believe it's going to be streaming. I believe it's going to be subscription. I think that's already happening, and it's only going to increase. I think it's silly to, I mean, personally, I think it's silly to, take your music off of services and do exclusive and window it. I don't think that makes sense in music. I think if you're an artist, the best thing for you to possibly do when you've already made the music and there's really no sort of marginal cost of distributing it is just get it as many places as possible and get every sort of fan you can around the world to hear that music. And sort of cordoning that off just feels very archaic, and it feels very short-sighted. So I think that there's still a lot of issues there. It's going to take a long time before subscription revenue ends up being super meaningful for artists. At the same time, there are innovations happening in in data analytics companies, in publishing. I mean, you look at what like Cobalt is doing, and they're actually finding a way to provide sort of data around where all of your music is being played as an artist when you've never had visibility into that. You've always been paid royalties based on God knows how many different calculations, and no one really knows how that works, right? The labels can't tell you, the publishers can't tell you, and you just get a check every month or however long. And as an artist, that's a terrible experience. So companies like that are super interesting. You look at what Shazam has done also on the data side, and that's provided a huge source of information to everyone from the labels and the artists and to fans and to promoters. I mean, it's really an interesting way of taking sort of data and seeing how that's affected sort of the entire sort of music pipeline.
Sure. So yeah, that's a great point. Having more data and more access to data and being able to do more with it will of course create new business models. I'm personally really excited about the whole effect of the blockchain technology on the music industry, and how that is already largely changing the whole microtransaction side of the industry. And if you're able to create more efficient transaction mechanisms, you can of course create entirely new forecasts as a musician in terms of where your music is going and how you're selling it and how you're giving it away, even if so-called giving it away. Because let's face it, a lot of the music is still free. It will be deemed free by the consumer for a long time. Maybe this is one thing we can touch upon, the blockchain, as well as the alternative freemium monetization mechanisms that you guys see through your business.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the biggest streaming service being YouTube, and that's a kind of a free service for most consumers, it's an issue when you want people to start paying for that all of a sudden, and so I think the blockchain is really interesting as far as what you can do as an artist potentially. What I think is hard is sort of the education around that. So most people still don't really understand what it is, how to use it, how to leverage it in order to create a real business there. So I think that there's going to have to be either some startups or someone who's actually figuring out like, what does this model look like? How do we bring on artists in a way that makes sense? And the artists that are going to be pioneering in that space, I would imagine, are going to be people who have significant online fan bases, probably the Radioheads of the world, people who are tech savvy, have experimented in ways like this before. Their fans trust that what they're going to do is going to be for their be in their sort of best interest. So I think it's a fascinating medium. I don't think it's going to work for every artist. Sure. Right? I think it works for those who have cultivated a fan base, who know that their fans are willing to pay up for a premium experience, and who really want to be involved. I mean, the average music listener probably won't care about something like that, right? They're going to want a great user experience, and they're going to want something like Spotify. So there's going to be a multitude of options probably, but it is a really interesting thing to think about.
Yeah. I think I see new services and new businesses sprout up left, right, and center, right? And I think it's fascinating from one particular angle is the direct-to-consumer model that certainly some businesses are experimenting with. And we see, of course, an immense potential shift in how money is flowing in the music industry if that does start happening. And if it is indeed powered by the blockchain, which we would expect to happen over the coming maybe 5 or so years, that of course creates an entire novel set of opportunities. Are you seeing anything? So you're LA based?
Yeah.
Correct? What are you seeing in LA that's sort of pushing this industry?
Yeah, so...
And who are the key players?
Yeah, as far as the direct-to-consumer side, I mean, I think less so on the actual sort of buying and selling of music, but we work with a company called Represent, which is in the on-demand merch business. And merch, I think, we haven't really touched on it, but it's a massive opportunity for artists. And what they're doing is really creating sort of on-demand campaigns for artists to sell merchandise to their fans through social media and through sort of limited run campaigns without having to do any of the work of actually creating, selling, distributing any of that merchandise. So it's really kind of a plug-and-play solution. Sell a shirt within 2 weeks, and the artist can keep the entire upside of whatever they choose to sell it for. So we've seen a ton of success with companies like that. I think as far as digital sales go, there's a few companies that are still playing in that space. Again, I think it's hard. I think you're competing against the streaming services, and unless you're a big name and you can sort of command something like that, it's just not going to be a big business.
Okay, that's a good point. So apropos merchandising, and that's of course a huge revenue stream for the artists. There's of course the physical merchandise, and then there's the digital merchandise, all of the brand-related stuff around the artist. We see in our business that companies, music labels, and managements are starting to think about digital first and then physical. We all know kind of how the physical world is working and the key players there and the dynamics. But when a lot of the value these days is coming from the digital side of things, it of course puts it in perspective with regards to where you're going to put it in the negotiation of the contracts that you're able to renegotiate. How are you seeing your artists push the digital merchandise ahead of the physical, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, on our side, I mean, it's really, merch is the key component to any sort of live show. So that's going to be much more important to us as far as, what we're negotiating on behalf of them for. As far as, them creating digital content as an artist, I mean, that's usually the artists who can afford to do something like that, can afford to do something more audiovisual, who understand sort of the value of having, a beautiful music video, or, I mean, you look at what U2 is doing with VR. One of our clients, Chris Milk, directed this, beautiful, immersive, kind of 360 music video for U2, and you can view it on your mobile device if you have the app. So those things, I think are really interesting, and it's people like U2 and their managers, frankly, who are actually thinking about, what are new ways for us to reach people and for them to hear the music. And I mean, frankly, I think there's nothing better than having a great visual component to that, to that audio.
So Molly, going back to our theme, we're talking about nowhere to hide, and I'd like to just focus on you. What keeps you awake at night? What are you concerned about, and where do you see opportunities, and how are you tackling your side of the business?
I think the sort of consensus in the U.S. at least on the venture side is that music is a very hard industry to invest in, and you have a lot of investors who will just say, no, I don't touch music, or oh no, I had a bad experience because of, if it's a streaming service, they're giving all the money to the labels and the artists, and if it's touring, it's hard to build a ticketing business because you have Live Nation and AEG. I'm concerned that there's a lot of people not starting businesses in music because of those hurdles, and there's a ton going on right now in early stage venture across all other aspects of entertainment. But I'm personally a huge music fan. I came from the music space, so I would love to meet with more companies from there, from that space and that world, whether it is ticketing or whether it's an online service or or publishing or VR or anything like that. So I think it's the barriers to entry, the competitors in the space that are concerning to people. But I mean that also just goes to show there's a lot of opportunity there.
Right. Yeah. No, I think as concluding remarks, because we're coming down to 2 minutes here. I think it's fascinating to see what part of the industry what state of the market we're in. We see a lot of great entrepreneurs coming into the market, thinking about fundamentally new models, everything from B2B music to novel models of subscription, to how the blockchain is going to power the music industry. What we're seeing also is, a lot of the large opportunities have been seized in the past 5 years, and today we're looking at the whole creation, co-creation, production side of the industry that I feel has a lot of potential. Are there any concluding remarks from you on that side of the business, like sort of pre-distribution? What happens to that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think again, kind of going back to the notion of creating music and what bedroom producers can do, and that whole process is totally shifting. You're seeing collaborations with musicians from big DJs to kids who are their fans happening online right now, and that's all because of technology that it's allowing that to happen. Whether it's Dropbox, whether it's companies like Splice that are creating a portal to do that in a collaborative setting. So I think it's so interesting with what the remix culture has kind of provided and what you're able to do now with artists. But yeah, I mean, it's again, you can only get to a certain point where if you want to reach that next level, you're still going to need the other players in the industry to come into play.
And any tips to the entrepreneurs in the audience who want to be part of the music industry? How do you create a sustainable competitive advantage? Maybe is a good thing to round up with.
No, it's interesting. I mean, I've been meeting with a few companies here and in the UK, and I think what's interesting is the notion of building a big business here first, and really kind of figuring out a lot of the struggles in local markets, because it's going to look very different in the US. And like I said, there's a bunch of competitors there that if you're in ticketing, it's going to be difficult. So I'm curious to sort of understand, how companies here are building traction and showing that over time, and then what their strategy is to enter the US.
Great. Molly, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, audience. And have a great Slush.